Israel strikes Iran nuclear sites and military leadership as Middle East braces for retaliation. Event overview. On June 12, 2025, Israel launched a significant military operation against Iranian nuclear facilities and high-ranking military leaders. This operation is seen as a decisive act amidst heightened tensions between the two nations, with Israel asserting that Iran's nuclear advancements represent an existential threat to its security. Timeline of key events. June 12, 2025, Israel executed airstrikes targeting multiple sites within Iran, including critical nuclear infrastructure known to be pivotal in the country's pursuit of nuclear weapons. The strikes also focused on Iranian military leadership, aiming to disrupt command and control capabilities. June 13, 2025, Iranian officials confirmed the strikes, which resulted in damage to several key facilities. Iranian leaders condemned the attacks, pledging a forceful response and rallying their populace for potential military retaliation. Targeting nuclear infrastructure and military leadership. The Israeli strikes were meticulously planned and executed, focusing on 1. Nuclear sites. Key facilities such as enrichment plants and research centers were targeted, disrupting Iran's nuclear capabilities. Israeli intelligence had reportedly gathered extensive information regarding the operations and locations of these sites. 2. Military leadership. High-ranking members of the Iranian military were also on the target list. This suggests a strategic dual approach, not only crippling infrastructure but also aiming to destabilize military command. Anticipation of retaliation. Experts and analysts predict that Iran will retaliate, potentially leading to a broader military conflict in the region. The Israeli strikes have raised the specter of retaliation not only from Iran but also from its regional allies. The potential for a wider conflict is concerning, as regional instability could escalate quickly. International reactions. Iranian officials have condemned the strikes as acts of aggression. The Iranian foreign minister stated that such actions would not go unanswered, signaling a forthcoming military response. United States and allies. The U.S. has called for restraint from both sides, urging diplomatic channels to address the increasing tensions. NATO allies are monitoring the situation closely, aware of the potential ripple effects across the region. Global markets. Financial markets have reacted to the news, with oil prices spiking due to fears of a potential conflict disrupting oil supplies from the region. Analysis of geopolitical implications. 1. Preemptive strike theory. Israel's actions exemplify the preemptive strike theory, where military action is taken to neutralize what is perceived as an imminent threat. This strategy has historical precedence in Israel's military doctrine, particularly concerning its adversaries in the region. 2. Shifts in alliances. The airstrikes could alter regional alliances, pushing Iran closer to other nations that oppose Israeli actions, such as Russia and China, while possibly reinforcing Israel's ties with the U.S. and Gulf Arab states concerned about Iranian influence. 3. Long-term consequences. The strikes may lead to long-term instability in the Middle East, with potential for ongoing military engagements. Analysts warn that if Iran retaliates successfully, it could embolden other hostile actors in the region. Conclusion. The Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites and military leaders mark a pivotal moment in Middle Eastern geopolitics, escalating an already tense situation. As the world watches, the potential for further conflict looms large, with analysts closely monitoring Iran's next moves. The region braces for possible retaliation that could have far-reaching consequences for international relations and stability in the Middle East. The recent airstrikes by Israel targeting Iranian nuclear sites and military leadership have generated considerable tension and are expected to result in significant geopolitical repercussions. Here are some counterintuitive aspects of the situation that may not be immediately apparent. 1. Perception of threat versus actual capabilities. While Israel perceives Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, the actual timeline for Iran's nuclear capability may not be as immediate as Israel fears. Analysts have debated the extent of Iran's nuclear development, suggesting that while the threat is serious, it may not be as imminent as Israeli intelligence portrays. This discrepancy raises questions about the justification for preemptive strikes. 2. Potential for Iranian unity, historically. External military actions against Iran have led to a consolidation of national unity against perceived aggressors. Instead of fracturing Iranian resolve, Israel's strikes could inadvertently strengthen domestic support for the regime, rallying various factions around a common cause and potentially increasing anti-Israel sentiment across the region. 3. International reaction dynamics. While one might expect strong international condemnation of Israel's actions, the geopolitical landscape is more complex. Some nations may view these strikes as a necessary step in countering Iranian influence in the region, particularly among Sunni Arab states that share concerns over Iran's power. This nuanced response could dilute outright condemnation from certain quarters that might traditionally oppose Israeli military action. For long-term strategic implications, the immediate focus on military retaliation might overshadow longer-term strategic implications of Israel's actions. For instance, these strikes could alter the calculus for U.S. involvement in the region, leading to a re-evaluation of alliances or military commitments that could have unintended consequences for both Israel and Iran. Additionally, such military actions may influence the behavior of other regional actors such as Turkey or Saudi Arabia, who may recalibrate their own strategies in response. 5. Impact on nuclear negotiations. The military strikes could complicate or even derail any ongoing negotiations related to Iran's nuclear program. While one might assume that military action would force Iran to capitulate, the opposite could occur, entrenching Iran's position and making it less likely to engage in diplomatic solutions. This could lead to an escalation cycle where military actions preclude diplomatic avenues, contrary to the intentions behind the strikes. 6. Civilian casualties and global perception. While military operations are often framed in terms of strategic targets, the inevitable civilian casualties can lead to a backlash that undermines the military objectives. Public opinion in various countries, particularly in the West, may shift against Israel if the strikes are perceived as disproportionate or contributing to humanitarian crises, potentially isolating Israel on the international stage. 7. Cyber warfare and asymmetrical responses. Rather than conventional military retaliation, Iran may opt for cyber warfare or other asymmetrical tactics that disrupt Israeli infrastructure or global supply chains. This approach could complicate Israel's military response capabilities and lead to a protracted conflict that is not confined to traditional theaters of war. 8. Repercussions on global energy markets. The strikes could disrupt oil supplies and alter energy market dynamics in ways that may not be immediately obvious. While one might assume that an escalation would lead to increased oil prices, other factors such as global demand and alternative energy sources could mitigate this effect, leading to unexpected stability in energy markets. 9. Shift in military strategy by Iran. In response to the strikes, Iran may alter its military strategy, focusing more on unconventional warfare and proxy engagements rather than direct confrontation with Israel. This could lead to an increase in asymmetric warfare tactics that complicate any Israeli or U.S. military response, thereby changing the nature of the conflict in ways that are not easily predicted. 10. Diverse reactions within Iran. Within Iran, there may be a spectrum of reactions to the strikes, ranging from calls for aggressive retaliation to voices advocating for restraint and diplomatic engagement. The complexity of internal politics means that a unified Iranian response is not guaranteed, and differing opinions could create rifts that Israel could exploit. Understanding these counterintuitive dynamics is essential for grasping the full potential impact of Israel's military actions against Iran and anticipating the broader implications for regional stability and international relations. In the context of the recent Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites and military leadership, several critical aspects may be overlooked by the general public but hold significant implications for regional and international dynamics. 1. Preemptive strike justification. One of the most important yet often glossed over elements is the underlying justification for Israel's preemptive strikes. While mainstream coverage highlights the immediate military implications, the broader strategic rationale is crucial for understanding Israel's actions. Israel has long viewed Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, framing its military actions as necessary for national survival. This preemptive approach reflects a deep-seated belief among Israeli leadership that failing to act could lead to a catastrophic scenario where Iran achieves nuclear capability. The concept of preemptive strikes is contentious in international law and norms, yet Israel's actions may set a precedent, potentially influencing how other nations justify similar actions in the future. 2. Targeting military leadership. The strikes not only targeted nuclear infrastructure but also high-ranking military officials. This dual strategy highlights a significant shift in military engagement norms. By eliminating key figures in Iran's military hierarchy, Israel aims to disrupt command and control capabilities, which could lead to a more chaotic and less coordinated Iranian response. This aspect is often overshadowed by discussions of nuclear facilities but is critical because it may have long-term implications for Iran's operational effectiveness and internal stability. The removal of leaders can create power vacuums, potentially leading to further fragmentation within Iran's military forces and impacting its regional proxies. 3. Regional alliances and dynamics. The geopolitical fallout from these strikes is extensive but frequently oversimplified. The immediate reactions from neighboring countries, particularly those in the Gulf region, may not be as straightforward as supporting Iran or condemning Israel. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which have historically been wary of Iranian expansion, might view Israel's actions through a lens of strategic opportunity. This could lead to realignments in regional alliances, as states reassess their positions in light of perceived threats. The potential for a new coalition against Iran, even involving Israel, is a nuance that is often overlooked in favor of a more binary portrayal of the conflict. 4. Iran's possible responses. While many reports predict a military retaliation from Iran, the implications of Iran's response are complex and multifaceted. Iranian responses may not solely be military. They could involve asymmetric warfare strategies, cyber attacks, or leveraging regional proxies to strike at Israeli interests indirectly. This ambiguity around Iran's potential responses complicates the narrative and suggests that the conflict could escalate in unexpected ways, impacting not just Israel and Iran but also affecting U.S. interests and other regional players. 5. Impact on civilian populations. Coverage tends to focus on military targets and strategic implications, often neglecting the human cost of such strikes. Civilian casualties and the destruction of infrastructure can exacerbate humanitarian crises within Iran and potentially destabilize the region further. The societal impact of military actions, including displacement and economic repercussions, is significant and can fuel anti-Israel sentiment, complicating future diplomatic efforts. This aspect is critical for understanding the broader ramifications of military conflict, which can perpetuate cycles of violence and resentment. 6. International response and legal ramifications. The legality of Israel's strikes under international law is a topic that warrants deeper analysis. While Israel may justify its actions as self-defense, the broader international community may view these strikes differently. The potential for international condemnation, sanctions, or calls for accountability could arise, affecting Israel's diplomatic relations globally. Furthermore, the lack of a unified international response may embolden similar actions by other states, setting dangerous precedents for military engagement. 7. Energy markets and global economics. The strikes against Iran, a key player in global oil markets, could have immediate effects on oil prices and energy security. While this economic aspect is often mentioned, the depth of its implications is frequently overlooked. Disruptions in oil supply due to conflict in the Middle East can lead to global economic instability affecting everything from inflation rates to energy security policies in nations far removed from the conflict zone. The interconnectedness of global economies means that the ramifications of regional conflicts can have far-reaching consequences that extend beyond direct military action. Conclusion. The recent Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites and military leadership are not just a military issue but a multifaceted crisis with implications that reach deep into regional stability, international relations, and global economics. Many narratives surrounding this event tend to focus on immediate military outcomes, neglecting the broader significance of preemptive strikes, regional alliances, civilian impacts, and potential international legal ramifications. Understanding these overlooked elements is crucial for grasping the full scope of the situation and anticipating future developments in this volatile region. Here are the 4 most valuable points for in-depth analysis and discussion regarding Israel's recent strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and military leadership. 1. Preemptive strike doctrine. Israel's airstrikes exemplify the doctrine of preemptive military action, which asserts that a state has the right to strike first when it perceives an imminent threat. This event raises critical questions about the legitimacy and consequences of such actions under international law. Analysts could explore how Israel justifies its strikes based on Iran's advancements in nuclear capabilities and whether this rationale is accepted by the international community. The implications of this doctrine extend beyond Israel and Iran, potentially influencing the behavior of other states in similar standoffs, and could lead to a re-evaluation of military engagement standards globally. 2. Geopolitical ramifications. The strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities and military leadership are likely to shift geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East. This action may alter existing alliances, provoke further militarization, and incite retaliatory actions from Iran and its allies, potentially leading to a wider conflict. A discussion could focus on how these events might influence U.S. foreign policy in the region, especially regarding its relationships with both Israel and Iran. Furthermore, the impact on regional players like Saudi Arabia, Hezbollah, and other militias should be examined, considering their historical tensions and alliances with Iran and Israel. 3. International reactions and diplomatic consequences. The international community's response to Israel's strikes will play a crucial role in shaping the future of Middle Eastern diplomacy. Various nations, particularly those involved in the Iran nuclear deal, may react differently, impacting diplomatic relations. An analysis could focus on how countries like the United States, Russia, and members of the European Union respond to this escalation. Potential changes in sanctions support for Israel or Iran, and shifts in diplomatic dialogue could all stem from the events surrounding the airstrikes. This could lead to a broader discussion about the effectiveness of diplomatic efforts in preventing military conflicts. 4. Civilian impact and humanitarian concerns. The airstrikes not only target military and nuclear sites but also risk significant civilian casualties and humanitarian crises. As Iran responds to these strikes, the potential for civilian suffering heightens, raising ethical questions about the conduct of war and the protection of non-combatants. An in-depth discussion on the humanitarian implications could investigate the responsibilities of both Israel and Iran in safeguarding civilians during military engagements. Furthermore, exploring the role of international humanitarian law in this context could provide insights into the legal frameworks governing such military actions and the accountability mechanisms for violations. These 4 points offer a comprehensive framework for analyzing the complexities surrounding Israel's military actions against Iran and their broader implications for regional stability, international relations, and humanitarian considerations. 1. Israel's strike on Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor. 1981. In June 1981, Israel carried out a preemptive airstrike against Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor, which Israel feared would be used to develop nuclear weapons. The operation, known as Operation Opera, involved the destruction of the reactor before it became operational. This bold move was met with international condemnation, but Israel justified it as a necessary step to ensure its national security. The incident set a precedent for future military actions aimed at preventing perceived existential threats. 2. U.S. airstrikes on Libya 1986. In April 1986, the United States conducted airstrikes against Libya in response to a series of terrorist attacks attributed to the Libyan government. The strikes targeted military installations and the residence of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The operation, known as Operation El Dorado Canyon, aimed to deter further Libyan aggression and was justified under the premise of self-defense and the protection of U.S. interests. The military action resulted in significant damage and casualties, escalating tensions between the U.S. and Libya. 3. U.S. and coalition strikes on Iraq 2003. The 2003 invasion of Iraq led by the United States was premised on the belief that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction (WMDs) and posed an imminent threat. The coalition forces launched a series of airstrikes and ground operations aimed at overthrowing Hussein's regime. The initial military campaign quickly led to the fall of Baghdad, however. The aftermath resulted in prolonged conflict and instability in the region. The justification of preemptive strikes based on perceived threats from WMDs remains a contentious topic in international relations. Future outlook: predictions following Israel's strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. The recent airstrikes by Israel on Iranian nuclear facilities and military leadership signal a critical turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics. As tensions escalate, the following predictions can be made regarding the future implications of this conflict. 1. Escalation of military engagements. The immediate aftermath of Israel's strikes is likely to see a sharp increase in military engagements between Iran and Israel. Analysts predict that Iran will respond with retaliatory strikes targeting Israeli assets and possibly extending to American interests in the region. The conflict may also draw in proxy groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, further complicating the security landscape in the Middle East. 2. Regional alliances and realignments. The strikes could catalyze significant shifts in regional alliances. Countries that have historically been wary of Iran may seek closer ties with Israel, while those allied with Iran may increase their support for it in a show of solidarity. The Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC) states, particularly Saudi Arabia, may reassess their security strategies and defense postures, potentially leading to new coalitions against perceived Iranian aggression. 3. Increased global diplomatic efforts. In response to the escalating conflict, international powers, particularly the United States and Russia, may intensify diplomatic efforts to prevent a wider war. The U.S. may seek to reinforce its military presence in the region as a deterrent, while also attempting to broker a ceasefire or de-escalation talks. The effectiveness of these efforts will depend on the willingness of both Iran and Israel to engage in dialogue amidst heightened tensions. 4. Nuclear proliferation concerns. The airstrikes could lead to increased fears of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. Iran may accelerate its nuclear program as a means of deterrence, prompting neighboring states to reconsider their own nuclear capabilities. This could result in a regional arms race, with countries like Saudi Arabia openly pursuing nuclear technology as a counterbalance to Iran. 5. Impact on global oil markets. The conflict is likely to disrupt oil supply routes, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point for global oil shipments. Any military escalation could lead to increased oil prices, affecting global markets. Countries heavily reliant on oil imports may face economic pressures, leading to broader economic implications and potential unrest. 6. Shift in U.S. foreign policy. The Biden administration may face pressure to re-evaluate its foreign policy in the Middle East. A more aggressive stance against Iran could emerge, characterized by increased military support for Israel and a reassessment of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. This shift could alienate diplomatic allies who favor a more conciliatory approach towards Tehran. 7. Humanitarian crisis and civilian impact. As military actions intensify, the humanitarian situation in both Iran and Israel as well as in neighboring countries is likely to deteriorate. Civilian casualties and displacement could rise, prompting international humanitarian responses. The potential for a refugee crisis could put additional strain on neighboring countries, particularly Iraq and Turkey. 8. Cyber warfare and asymmetric tactics. In addition to conventional military responses, both Israel and Iran may escalate their use of cyber warfare. Israel has a history of cyber operations against Iranian infrastructure, and Iran may retaliate with cyber attacks on Israeli civilian and military systems. This shift towards cyber tactics could redefine the nature of warfare in the region. 9. Long-term stability of the region. The strikes will likely contribute to a longer-term instability in the Middle East. The cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation may entrench hostilities, making any future peace negotiations more difficult. The historical grievances between Israel and Iran, coupled with the involvement of multiple actors, could result in a protracted conflict that reshapes the geopolitical landscape for years to come. Conclusion. The airstrikes by Israel against Iranian nuclear sites mark a pivotal moment in Middle Eastern affairs, with the potential for wide-ranging consequences. As regional dynamics shift and tensions rise, the international community will be watching closely for signs of escalation or avenues for de-escalation. The coming months will be critical in determining whether a broader conflict can be avoided or if the region will descend into a more violent and unstable phase.